really interesting one. It's a subject that interests all of us. In the next keynote, our speaker will talk about the power of authenticity, building trust and engagement in news broadcasting. As we all know, news broadcasting is subconsciously, unconsciously, consciously a part of our lives. It has always been, and it so will continue in the future as well. But how do we see it molding, developing, or sort of engaging with the current needs or the future needs? And to talk more about the subject, the power of trust, the power of authenticity in the news broadcasting, we have with us a very special guest today. Please put your hands together for none other than Zakka Jacob, Managing Editor, CNN News 18. Welcome, sir, please. Thank you so much for joining us. Over to you. Sure.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I know the first session after lunch is probably not a particularly good idea, especially if you're the speaker as you're waiting for people to come back in. And it's also the session that generally people, if you don't have your black coffee or your black teas, it's the session that you tend to sort of doze off. Kya hi karna hai, kya bhashan de rahe hain, kya gyan sunna hai, and all that. But the reason I stand before you is because I think the topic that's been given to me is a very important one, not just for people like me who are on the inside, but because the industry that I represent, which is television news, news broadcasting, is such a public-facing industry. We come into your lives every day, every night, tell you what's happening around you. So I think it's absolutely vital for us in this industry to build our relationship with our audiences, with our viewers, night in, night out, on the basis of trust. Because if you don't trust what we are saying to you on the daily broadcast, then that product is not going to survive for too long. Because trust is the basic factor that enables conversations between news establishments and their audiences. So thank you very much, first of all, to AdGully and the organizers here, Bijoya, and everyone else, for having me here to talk about this subject, which for us, it's a living practice. It is something, authenticity is something that we have to practice every day, because without that, I don't think a news organization, whether you're in a print establishment, whether you're on a digital platform, whether you're on television bringing the news every day, without that basic authenticity, no one's going to take you seriously. So, as I stand before you today, this topic is of immense significance in a rapidly evolving world. It's the power of authenticity, because in this era where we have information overload, there's also rising skepticism, there is the specter of fake news. I think establishing trust and engaging audiences is going to be absolutely crucial for any news organization. Authenticity is that key which unlocks the doors to trust, it helps foster meaningful connections with our viewers, and it reinforces the very vital role that journalism plays. Now, I know it's polarized times, it's contested times. There are many people, maybe even in this audience, but certainly on social media, you will see a stream of people who believe that journalism and journalists are bad for society, that they actually are purveyors who don't necessarily toe a certain line or don't necessarily help in the cause of nation building and so on. As someone who's been in this profession for the last 20 years, I think journalism is absolutely vital to society, to nation building, because at the end of the day, we are, as we call ourselves, the fourth estate. And the fourth estate, its primary job is to have checks and balances, because unfiltered power can be bad for democracy. So I think journalism as an institution, as a profession, is a public good. It's a service. Of course, it is also for profit for channels like ourselves. We are in the business of ratings. We are in the business of advertisers and so on. So yes, we are not doing this for charity. So I'll be very clear about that. I'll be the first one to admit that we are doing this for business and for profit. But at the same time, it is also a public good. Because without the public good and the public service nature of journalism, then I don't know what this profession is. It becomes like any other profession that is meant for profit. Now, coming to the topic of authenticity, we find ourselves in this age of fake news, and this is a problem that newsrooms like mine face every single day. This is a living problem for us. The advent of social media and the rapid spread of misinformation has given rise to a crisis of trust in the media. People today are not taking the media as seriously as they used to 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. In recent years, we have seen numerous instances where fake news has not only misled the public, but it has had real-world consequences. People have lost their lives because of fake news. So whether it is fabricated stories talking about manipulating public opinion, you've seen in the US, for example, there was a former president who openly says that the election that he lost, he believes that election was stolen from him, right? And now he's facing criminal charges for that. So I cannot overstate the need for traditional avenues of journalism, whether they are broadcast, print, or even digital in this day and age, simply because we live in a time and space where no one knows what is real and what is fake. And if you need to sift, as they say, the wheat from the chaff, you need authentic sources of information. I'll give you an example that we faced recently, just a few days ago. There was this story around an explosion that happened at the Pentagon building. The Pentagon building is where the Ministry of Defense is in the United States. It's arguably one of the most protected, well-protected, most secure buildings in the world. And there was this story that broke, it was about 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, which would have been morning time in the East Coast in the US, saying that there was this massive explosion that happened outside the Pentagon building. Now, the source of this story, it first appeared on a Bloomberg Twitter handle. Now, it was not the main Bloomberg handle, but it was called Bloomberg Feeds or something. And the reason why this story became viral, or why newsrooms started picking up this story, was because this particular handle, from where this story originated, had a blue tick. So which means it's an authentic handle, or at least you're led to believe that it's an authentic handle. So newsrooms around the world picked it up. Here in India, too, many news channels played this story saying, you know, there's been a big explosion outside the Pentagon building. In fact, the impact of it was felt straight away because the Dow Jones, which is the US stock market index, fell very briefly upon this news. Now, interestingly, after about half an hour or so, one of our producers, and we, by the way, CNN News18, the channel that I represent, were one of the few news channels here in India which did not carry that story. You could have blamed us for being late on that story, but in this case, it was interesting that we didn't choose to go with this story because for us, because we are the India affiliate of CNN, we have to wait for them to break any international story, and particularly this was a US-related story, so we had to wait for them to break it before we could break it. That sort of happenstance served us well because a lot of the other channels here broke that story, and turns out that that entire thing was fake. The Bloomberg handle from where it was tweeted out was fake. As you know, on Twitter these days, you can pay money to get a blue tick. You don't have to be an authentic source of information, or you don't have to be an authentic news brand to get that blue tick. You can just pay money, $8 a month, and you'll get a blue tick. So it turns out that someone in some corner of the globe started this handle called Bloomberg Feeds, paid $8 a month, and got a blue tick. And because it had come from what was looking like an authentic Twitter handle, newsrooms around the world picked it up. But here is where, and this instance to me illustrates why you need to have trusted sources of information and trusted news outlets. Because the only way you can beat this fake news specter in this day and age is if you have reporters on the ground. If you can pick up, if editors in the newsroom can pick up the phone, call up reporters, call up the Pentagon reporter and ask him or her, you know, has such a thing happened? That person will obviously then call up his or her sources and confirm or deny this news. And that is why I think in this day and age, especially when you have, you know, AI-generated images, you must have seen that image which did the rounds recently of the wrestlers' protest. I believe there were two wrestlers who were shown as smiling as they were being taken away by the Delhi police. Turns out that that entire image was AI generated. Sam Altman was here a few days ago, and he is the founder of OpenAI, ChatGPT, the firm behind ChatGPT, and he said, this is a very dangerous time. Maybe at GPT-4, it's not threatening humanity, it's not threatening our very existence, but by the time you get to GPT-10, no one can guarantee that AI will be playing with our lives. In fact, this is just one example of how artificial intelligence was used to peddle fake news. So, which is why I think, because of all of these, fault lines, because of all these potholes on the road, as it were, to use a metaphor, I think the only way that news organizations can reinforce their importance, or why the country and our society needs news organizations, is because only news organizations have the ability and have the feet on the ground to call up and find out, has such a thing happened? Has an explosion happened outside this building? Or were the wrestlers smiling when they were being taken away by the Delhi police? You can only do this if you have, as they say in military lingo, boots on the ground. So news organizations have boots on the ground, and therefore we are in a position where we can separate the wheat from the chaff, say to you immediately that this news is fake, that this should not be believed. So the point I'm making is that episodes like this, whether it was the Pentagon explosion, whether it was the wrestler story, will continue to happen in newsrooms around the world. It'll pop up on your Twitter feed. It'll come up on your Facebook news feed. These stories will keep popping up simply because these organizations, social media platforms, either don't have the incentive or the interest to try and fact check. Yes, they do make some noise, and they have been making some noise of late, that they are fact checking, especially on WhatsApp. For example, what happened in WhatsApp was in 2018, and this was, I think, the first big instance where India encountered the specter of fake news and what real-life consequences fake news can have. In 2018, there were a series of rumors, primarily which spread on WhatsApp, about these child abductions. It started from Maharashtra, then I think in Assam as well, there was these WhatsApp messages that were doing the rounds. Turns out that people were lynched merely on suspicion of child trafficking. The thing was actually not happening. Nobody was, smuggling children, or nobody was part of this organ donation racket. It was just spread on WhatsApp, and people were getting lynched basis these WhatsApp messages. So in 2018, this issue became so huge that WhatsApp, for the very first time, had to institute controls on the number of times you could forward messages, red flags appearing on messages that are fake. You also had restrictions on the number of people you could send messages to. So it was the first time that social media platforms started realizing that they are not just a force for good. They can be a force for very, very dangerous consequences and a force for evil, as it were, because, like I said, it has real-world consequences. People's lives were lost basis fake news. So in the face of these challenges, we've also witnessed inspiring stories of resilience, journalists who risk their careers and at times even their lives to report the truth. These are the beacons of authenticity. They are embodying a spirit of journalism which holds those who are in power accountable and brings to light important issues that society needs to face. We must recognize and we must support not only this profession, but also individuals who are part of this profession, because it matters in your everyday life. You don't want to be the victim of a fake news forward on WhatsApp or any other social media platform. So how do we, here on the inside, as part of journalism organizations, as part of news organizations, how do we encourage the identification of fake news, bringing forth transparency and authenticity so that not only our credibility is intact, but also the trust, the bond that we have with our viewers is intact, because they can then trust us to be authentic sources of information. The first aspect, of course, is transparency in newsroom operations. It's a crucial element to build trust and engagement. News organizations like ours are very open about our processes, our fact-checking methods, and also our sources, basis whom we are putting stories on the air. We are providing audiences a behind-the-scenes look at how news is produced, how content is produced, and additionally, we also invite feedback and engage in open dialogue with our viewers. So there is a sense of community, there is a sense of collaboration, and that further strengthens the bond of trust between the viewers and the news organization. For example, in CNN News18, the channel that I represent, we have a department called Standards and Practices. S&P basically looks at every sensitive story that comes into the newsroom, checks out if the sources are correct, checks out if both sides have been spoken to, and only after the S&P editor, and the S&P editor in our case is one of the most senior members of our newsroom, only after the S&P editor gives her clearance can that story go on air. Even if me, as the editor of the channel, if I say go ahead with the story, but if the S&P editor says no, I have these caveats which need to be checked before the story can go on air, the story will not go. So the S&P editor, it's a role that we take very, very seriously. It is again part of our CNN playbook, as it were. CNN has the same thing. They have an S&P team, and any sensitive story. Obviously, you can't do this with every story because of the nature of the fast-paced news that we're living in. But for sensitive stories, unless the S&P department clears it, like I said, even I, as the editor of the channel, cannot put that story on air. The other way that we have introduced, of course, is interactive storytelling, particularly in the last few years because of the advent of social media. This has become a powerful tool for us to engage with our audiences authentically. So if we go to our YouTube channel, for example, not only are people watching it real time, the same thing that is going on television, but there is an active chat box for every live stream that we are running. So by that active chat box, you know exactly real time what people are telling you about your content. If they like it, you continue with that. If they don't like your content, that is real-time feedback for you to change that content or elements within that content. So engaging audiences through interactive means, whether it is YouTube or any other social media platform which gives you real-time feedback, is again, I go back to one of the elements of transparency and building trust, because viewers then know that it's not just a one-way street. Television in the old days used to be a one-way street. It was a bunch of guys coming on TV and giving you gyan, as it were. But today, that's not the case. We have to mold and shape our own story preferences, our own responses, our debates and arguments, chat shows, etc., basis what you are telling us real time. And that's what social media platforms like YouTube have enabled and helped us do. There's also technological advancements. I talked about artificial intelligence, machine learning, algorithms. They're all being used by employees today, real time in the newsroom, to analyze vast amounts of data, identifying patterns that are associated with misinformation. These tools that we have, you have all kinds of softwares. Google provides a fact-check software. You also now have independent news organizations. You must have heard of Alt News and Boom Live. These are organizations that allow you to real-time fact-check any story that has popped up on social media. So news organizations like ours are subscribers to those fact-checking websites or fact-checking apps and so on. And of course, like I said, Google Fact Check and other social media fact check instruments that are there, that are available to journalists and to broadcasters to be able to establish and maintain those high standards. In addition to that, there is also the International Fact-Checking Network, which is IFCN. There's also the Trusted News Initiative. And here in India, what we call the NBDSA, the News Broadcasters and Digital Standards Authority. It used to be the NBSA before, but now the digital platforms are also part of it. So any viewer who has a complaint with the standards of any news channel can write to the NBDSA. It is headed by a retired judge. They go into every complaint that they receive, whether it is on fake news, whether it is on too much opinion, whatever your complaint is, they go through each one of those, and wherever redressal needs to be met with, then they do those redressals. There have been multiple instances of various channels having put out stories that are wrong, because of NBDSA orders, because it's a quasi-judicial body, because of NBDSA orders, they've had to either put an apology on their social media handles or sometimes even on the air, on ticker. There have been very rare instances where the anchor has had to come on air and apologize for a story that was authentically wrong. So finally, I would, in conclusion, I would say that the power of authenticity is absolutely vital. It is absolutely critical in a profession like journalism, and particularly television and broadcasting journalism, because, like I said at the top of my speech, you are coming into viewers' homes, into their mobile phones, day in, day out, night in, night out. If they have to trust you to watch you, then authenticity is absolutely key to that. It's not something that can be underestimated in the business of news broadcasting. It's a force that can dispel the darkness of fake news. It can help rebuild trust and, most importantly, reinvigorate the role of journalism as one of the cornerstones of democracy. By upholding journalistic integrity, by entrusting unbiased reporting, being transparent in newsroom operations, and by embracing technology and interactive storytelling, we can navigate the challenges of modern media landscape and reclaim the trust of our audiences. So with that, I come to the end of my speech. Thank you very much once again, adgully, for inviting me here and speaking on this very, very important topic. Certainly for me as an insider, and I hope for you, the view from the outside has also been just as compelling. Thank you very much.
Your wonderful, wonderful insights. Once again, please give it up. Thank you. Make some noise. I'm sure this will help a lot of you.